Okay, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us for today's webcast. My name is Rebecca and I'm a content editor here at GitLab. Today we're going to be talking about cloud-native development and what moving towards a cloud-native approach means for your developers and for your whole business. But first, I'm just going to go through a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Firstly, this webcast is being recorded and we'll share the recording via email to everyone who registered. We'll also save your questions for the end of the webcast, but please feel free to type them in the Q&A as you think of them. You'll find it to the left of the presentation in your webcast console. Cloud native isn't just a buzzword. It's a vision for how businesses can be more flexible, reduce their costs, increase collaboration, and improve security. Your presenter today is GitLab CEO and co-founder Sid, and in this webcast, he'll talk about what cloud native means and the benefits of adopting a cloud-native approach to software development, including increased agility and flexibility, reduced costs, increased collaboration, and a better customer experience. We'll also talk about some of the challenges associated with going cloud-native and suggest some ways to counter these. We'll present GitLab's vision of a cloud-native future, and then our head of product, Mark, will show you a demo of GitLab's cloud-native features. We'll finish off with a preview of what's next for cloud-native with GitLab. With that, it's over to you, Sid.
Thank you, Rebecca. So first, I want to explain what is cloud native. So cloud native applications embrace a new approach to building and running applications, one that takes full advantage of the cloud computing model and container schedulers. Not to be confused with running traditional applications in the cloud. Cloud native means that applications are purpose-built for the cloud and consist of loosely coupled services. Applications need to be re-architectured for running in the cloud, shifting the focus away from the machines to the service. Cloud native acknowledges that the cloud is about more than just who manages your servers. It's the next step in digital transformation. So now that we know what cloud native means, you might be wondering why people make such a fuss about it. Why go cloud native at all? A cloud native approach to software development has a number of advantages for a business. For one thing, you can shift focus from cost savings to increasing revenue. By building applications that can run on any cloud, right out of the box, you're free to migrate and distribute across vendors in line with your budget and business priorities. You also free up developer time. You don't have to write code to run at scale across a range of cloud infrastructures. So because they don't have to do that, they can focus on improvements and new features. So cloud native software development also helps to align operations with business goals. By automating the process of software delivery and IT operations, your team can spend more time on their business priorities. Because cloud native and DevOps go hand in hand, it supports close collaboration between development and operations teams. This means a faster, smoother process from idea to production. Adopting cloud-native practices can also help you improve your security. Reimagining security for cloud-native means evolving security measures at the same pace as you deliver cloud-native software, helping you to keep up with evolving threats. Moving to cloud-native can be a significant but shared effort. Once it's done, every new developer benefits from a quick and easy setup process once established. So now we know what cloud native is and why it's a good thing. What are some elements that make up a cloud native approach? Firstly, DevOps is a set of practices for developing software that emphasizes integration and collaboration between teams and sharing responsibility for the outcome. This means working together and keeping each other in the loop throughout the entire software development lifecycle. Another cornerstone of cloud native is continuous delivery. This is a software development discipline where you build software in such a way that the software can be released to production at any time. This is the next step after continuous integration. Cloud native development and deployment also relies on microservices. This is a way of designing software applications to consist of suites of independently deployable services, rather than a single monolithic application. And finally, a significant part of cloud native development is taking advantage of container schedulers like Kubernetes, which dynamically scale up and down particular components of your application as and when it needs more or fewer resources, saving on hosting costs. With container schedulers, the focus shifts from the machine to the service. The machine becomes an ephemeral, disposable element. If you weren't already on board with Cloud Native, hopefully we've convinced you why it's the way of the future. But adopting this approach is not without its challenges. Adopting a new way of working with the DevOps approach can be tricky. In some organizations, this will be a radical transformation for operations, and it may meet some resistance from the keepers of the status quo. It can also be difficult to convince others to transition from legacy technology. Many organizations are attached to legacy technology, applications, and practices, and some team members may be hesitant to move on from it. You might also come up against security concerns about relying on container technology. The use and management of application containers is not yet well understood by all stakeholders, which might be an obstacle to embracing containers and container schedulers. So, how can you overcome these challenges? Firstly, start small. Isolate your new cloud-native approach to one small, low-risk project to begin with. Under-promise and over-deliver on it, and let the results be your best argument for going cloud-native. And educate your peers. Changes to traditional security measures are resisted out of fear of potential threats. Meanwhile, threats are evolving faster than those measures can keep up with them. Bringing your security in line with cloud-native principles means you can take a proactive approach. You can start preventing threats instead of just responding to them, automating system updates and moving away from static, unchanging, and therefore vulnerable systems. So what does that mean for us at GitLab? We want to become the best place to build cloud-native applications. Cloud-native means moving away from monolithic apps towards microservices, which causes a big increase in the number of projects, making consistent and efficient application lifecycle management more important than ever. So with GitLab, you can go all the way from chatting about an idea to monitoring the release to production. Having this integrated in one product with one interface and one data store brings many emergent benefits, such as the availability of cycle analytics. Cycle analytics helps you to reduce the time between having an idea and deploying it. Reducing this time increases the effectiveness of your developers and your business. Because GitLab is an all-in-one solution, developers can focus on improving your application instead of stringing together their tooling. Adopting Cloud Native is easier because GitLab offers auto-deploy. GitLab leverages Cloud Native fully to enable review apps, auto-scaling CI, and deploy boards. We've already taken some steps towards going full Cloud Native. We want to show this in action, so now we're going to go into a into a demo showing you some of our cloud native features in action.
Hello, I'm Mark Punsock, Head of Product at GitLab, and I'm going to demo a few cloud-native features of GitLab 9.0 Enterprise Edition. I'm starting off with an empty Kubernetes cluster running on Google Cloud Platform. Now I'll connect to it, and then make sure Helm is set up. Then add GitLab's chart repo. I've already got an EE trial license, so I'll put that into the environment. And finally, I can install GitLab using our Helm chart. The Helm chart is incredibly convenient for installing GitLab because it sets up everything you need, including separate containers for Postgres and Redis, and Helm makes it easy to override individual images, like I did here by specifying GitLab EE instead of the default GitLab CE. Great, now let's log in. Perfect. A new instance for GitLab. I'll create my first project. Here, I'm just going to copy a very simple Ruby app to save myself some typing. Now that it's imported, I need to configure the project to use the Kubernetes cluster. Here I just need to point it to the Kubernetes cluster itself, the IP address that we're using. And then I need to copy over the secrets so that we can access it. Good, looks great. And that completes our project setup. Now we're ready to configure GitLab Auto Deploy. This is a great template to get us started, and we just need to edit the kube domain to use our own domain. Great, that completes our project setup. We can see that it immediately kicks off a new CI/CD pipeline to build the app. Here it's building a Docker image and then pushing it up to the registry. And now that it's built, it actually goes and deploys a temporary review app, so I can see exactly what this is going to look like. Just for fun, I'm going to connect directly to the Kubernetes pod that is running this review app. From here, I can make temporary changes and see the effects. This saves me a lot of time configuring my local laptop to run the code, and it's especially useful for debugging. Right, let's just restart the server, and now we can view the web page live and see how we like the changes. Now that I'm happy with it, let's go and merge that into master. Taking a look at the Pipelines tab, we see that we're rerunning CI on master to make sure that the tests still pass after the merge. And there we can actually see a history of all CI/CD pipeline runs, and if there are any failures, it'll quickly show you which stage they failed at. Now, underneath, the project actually created a bunch of Docker images, both for the topic branch and now for master, and those are stored locally in the built-in container registry. Now I can promote that staging build to production, and it will reuse that image and just go ahead and deploy it. Now that's finished, we can see a list of the environments. The review app is gone because it was automatically deleted after the merge, but we can see that production was just deployed to. And the great feature in 9.0 is that we see the deploy board showing that there was a single pod, but now when I scale that manually using the Kubernetes command line and then reopen the deploy board, we can see that it's now rolling out 10 instances of the application. It's currently at 30. Now it's at 90%, 9 out of 10. And there it's finished. Now that is really cool. But how about the application itself? Clicking on the graph icon, I can see a graph of CPU and memory usage. There's not much to see right now because it hasn't been running very long, but this will show the last 8 hours so you can monitor how your app is doing. Underneath, we're using Prometheus to automatically monitor anything you deploy to Kubernetes. We don't just use Prometheus for your apps. We also use it to monitor the GitLab instance itself. So here, let's take a look at some raw queries. This one should give us the CPU usage. And then here's another one for the memory usage. So that's it. In less than 10 minutes, we installed GitLab on Kubernetes, built a project, created review apps, stored Docker images in a container registry, deployed to production on Kubernetes, and monitored with Prometheus. How's that for a cloud-native software development lifestyle?
So now we've seen how GitLab already supports cloud-native development, but we want to go even further. You've just seen how with GitLab 9.0, we released the first iteration of deploy boards. Users are now able to watch a deploy from start to finish, seeing it roll out across pods. If you spot something that needs to be fixed, you can easily stop or roll back in one click. But we're also working on improving our support for container schedulers. Right now, it's easy to deploy from GitLab to a container scheduler. We want to make it easy, not just to deploy, but also to maintain and upgrade applications in this environment. We want users to be able to develop on containers, not just to use them for staging and production. In GitLab 9.1, we'll be releasing canary deploys. And with GitLab 9.2, we'll ship cross-project collaboration and pipelines for CI and CD. We've already released powerful monitoring, but in the coming releases, we'll be increasing their functionality. I'd like to hand it back to Rebecca.
Thank you, Sid and Mark, for that demo. Now you have a chance to ask any questions you have about cloud native or using a cloud native approach with GitLab. But I'll kick things off first with a question for you, Sid. We've talked a bit about what our immediate plans are for cloud native with GitLab, but I'm interested in what the end goal is. Where would you like to see us 2 years from now?
Thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, I think that what we see happening with people that adopt cloud native is that it's harder to update applications. So as soon as you start embracing containers and microservices, you end up with a lot of containers, with a lot of dependencies, and it's hard to keep them up to date. So we want to get to a place where if a dependency is updated, it rolls out almost automatically to GitLab. And you only get, so suppose there's a new package in Debian that gets upgraded. It should roll out overnight to the hundreds of applications you have. And the next morning, you should not get 100 warnings like you have to update them. You should see one warning, and it should be, we try to update this application, but the monitoring in GitLab detected that it's no longer meeting its service level objectives, and therefore we automatically reverted it. Everything is fine, but you have to look into this. That is the goal we're striving towards.
Okay, thank you. We've had a question from Matthew. he wants to know, how does auto-deploy handle deployments where something like a database migration is required?
That's an excellent question. Right now, auto-deploy doesn't currently support databases automatically for you at all, but we envision that in future iterations, we will run a migration for you during the deploy part itself. So, you do the deploy and you put out the code and then you'd run the migration and then, switch over the routing or whatever. Obviously, depending on your language or framework, you may have more complicated requirements, but we believe that making sure that migrations run during deploy is really important.
Okay, and we had another question from the same Matthew. Will you support something like blue-green deployments?
That's not a great question. So in I believe 9.1, we are going to start supporting canary deployments, which is a kind of blue-green, depending on how you're defining blue-green. And then we have an issue to do a more generic incremental rollout, which is kind of like a blue-green. So we definitely want to support these more complicated rollout structures. We believe that's pretty important. And so Canary is the first one where you'd set it, 10% of your fleet or something would roll out to the next version. And then when that's approved, you would automatically or manually roll out to the rest of production. What's really great with that is that because we've got Prometheus monitoring, we actually want to tie that all together so that you can know with confidence that your Canary deploy is still behaving as you expect, that it didn't suddenly, spike in memory usage or error rates or something like that. And so that you're not just relying on your manual testing, but this kind of stuff that we can actually automate that entire process. So we believe that tying that part back into Prometheus is a really valuable piece.
Okay, thank you. Matthew asks, with the move to cloud native and container-based deploys, is the deploy board staying an Enterprise Edition premium feature? Since it seems to me it's not limited to only very large organizations, which EE Premium is targeted to.
Yeah, thanks for that question.
Oh, go ahead.
It's a good question. No feature is just limited to only large organizations. So our criterion is it more relevant to larger organizations? What we've seen so far is that these advanced deployment methods are mostly developed in larger organizations. For example, Netflix has a project called Spinnaker that does something similar to deploy boards, although right now it has many more features. So we think deploy boards are more relevant to larger organizations. It could be that at some point the basic deploy boards will end up in GitLab Community Edition, and some of the more advanced features of them will be Enterprise Edition only. But for now, we saw that like advanced deploy tools get increasingly more needed as your organization is larger. So that's why for now we made this trade-off, and we're willing to reconsider that if it turns out to really need it. Just to be clear, with GitLab Community Edition, you can still do deploys to Kubernetes. You just won't have the insight in how many containers got converted so far.
Okay, we've got another question from Matthew. Mark, do you want to take this one, please?
Yeah, so it looks like with OpenShift, Iron.io bringing support for serverless environments, would auto-deploy templates potentially support this type of application deployment? So I assume you mean when you say serverless, you're talking about like sort of Lambda and Google's kind of serverless things. We definitely could support that kind of deployment. We don't yet have anything going that direction. This is more about deploying to Docker images, things like that. If maybe you're asking about something slightly different, in which case feel free to ask a follow-up question. But we definitely want to support anything you want to do there. But right now we have a focus on sort of traditional web apps and then Docker-based web apps.
Yeah, it's a great question, and we're certainly monitoring the serverless environment. I think that Iron.io as a company is scaling down at the moment. but an interesting one to watch is Qplus, which has a collaboration with Bitnami. So definitely keeping an eye on that. And when that story about how to deploy serverless applications gets more fleshed out, we intend to support that in GitLab. But we, for now, most of our users and customers have traditional non-serverless applications, so we want to focus on that first.
Okay, thank you. I think that might be the last of our questions. Oh, just had a couple of new ones come in. Okay, so Matthew has a follow-up remark. He says, we have a self-hosted enterprise data instance, and as a startup, we are using a very modern deployment scheme, hence our interest. I do believe that is a common use case. Most of the stuff, of the geo stuff from Premium is not of interest to us. Do you have any comments for that, Sid or Mark?
Yeah, well, great to hear that you're using modern deployments. Let's see. Let's discuss. Feel free to open an issue to bring it back to the community edition and discuss your use case there. It's good to hear that with the GitLab Geo's functionality that is indeed something where we're which is an obvious enterprise feature, but these things are always a trade-off. I don't think there's any feature in Enterprise Edition which is not wanted by a startup or a smaller organization. So we continually try to strike a balance there.
Okay, thank you. We just had a question from Shen asking if the session is being recorded. Yes, it is, and we will send you a link afterwards. So if you're joining us late, you can watch it on demand at a later stage at a time that suits you. I think that's all of the questions. As Sid mentioned, you're always welcome to open an issue and start a conversation with us that way, or you can find us on Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn. If there are no more questions, I'll move us on to what's coming up. If you're interested in any of our upcoming webcasts, you can join us on March 29th for a closer look at what we packed into GitLab 9.0. We are really proud of this release, and we would love to show you what you can expect in it. And all that's left to say is thank you so much again, and have a great rest of your day. See you next time.